So I guess with that, let's dig in because we only have 30 minutes before a lot of the other content goes. And what I really want to do is focus on framing what we can do with Copilot. And I think in order to get to that, for some of you, you're probably going to want to have a high-level overview of what Copilot is within Microsoft and how we are actually using that then to address business challenges. And I want to just emphasize this. You've probably heard this as well. This is a solution looking for a problem, right? And it's the exact opposite. I think what we're starting to see now is that the capabilities of what Copilot is enabling really allow for you to come up with some very creative ways to address needs inside of an environment, from a business process requirement to automation to making it easier for people to interact, obviously, with computers. There's just a ton that Copilot offers as we go through this. So let's go ahead, and it looks like if you are having some issues with the stream, you can refresh it. I know that's going in chat as well because I'm trying to monitor that as we go through it. What I'm going to do here really quickly is flip over to my main screen, and I really just want to talk about just quickly here how Copilot works. Because no matter what technology set that we use, whether it's on the Azure platform, if it's on the Modern Work platform, or if it's on the Dynamics platform, the concept works really pretty much the same. So when we look at Microsoft 365 Copilot, we really look at three main components that are used in that process to really identify data and then interact with it. The very first thing that we do, obviously, is we have an application that creates a prompt. A prompt at a high level, like within Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, is when you open up that wonderful Copilot pane and you type in some type of information that you want to get to as you go through that process, right? And what Copilot is really this set of services that then take those prompts and then do things with them. And right now, we look at Copilot as something that's like a ChatGPT type based capability, right? But longer term, as we look at this middle service from a Copilot perspective, and as it develops better, we're going to see even more capabilities added to it, where maybe we're not going to a large language model, but we're going to a large multimodal model, right? There's just a lot of different concepts that are coming into the industry now around this. At the highest level, what happens here is you ask a program to do something for you. The Copilot service goes through and gathers data, for example, inside of Microsoft Graph. High level, Graph is an API that allows us to access your Exchange emails or your contacts or many of the modern 365 based concepts that are there. What we then do is we take that content and we bring it to a large language model. So this was the key breakthrough that made a lot of these ancillary services possible. Now, before we were able to do this, right, with Cortana Intelligence, for example, we had the ability to actually create programmatic ways to interact with machines so that we could use voice to be able to tackle it. But the problem that we had continually with that type of technology was being able to understand the content of what that phrase was, meaning you had to programmatically add, for example, different ways to be able to slice and dice that data to then create some type of an output. Well, with Copilot and by using large language models, what we can do is we can take that content now, bring it to a large language model, have it do some processing as part of it, and then from there, what we can also do is basically ensure that we are able to take that response back and then bring it basically over to the actual application in question. And all of this is happening from a secure perspective as well, as you can imagine. In your tenant, you have data rights and security that's around it. And the net result, though, is that we're able to use these services with many different applications in the Microsoft stack. So with that, this is a good refresh, right? The framing, if you haven't been on Confab before, to really see what those kinds of capabilities are. But the question now is, what is actually in the applications, right? Like, what do we have that we can start using, not only from a first-party perspective, what Microsoft has created, but what you can extend and tackle from the Power Platform perspective, or even inside of finance and operations or in Business Central. There's just a lot of new capabilities that are being added now with these Copilot-based solutions. So I'm going to do one thing real quick here. I was asked, as you all saw kind of in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera back on. So we've got a double camera going here. So you get two of me, which is scary. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead now and show you now a little bit more of what we can do with Copilot and what you should start framing your mind around in order to start leveraging this capability to really focus on automation, efficiency. There's just so many different options here that you can tackle. So first and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and open up finance and operations as just a quick example inside of here. Now, within finance and operations, we get our wonderful Copilot pane. So on the top right here, if I click on Copilot as an example, when it doesn't lose my connection because I've been too long at this, what we're going to see just really quickly here is the fact that I can actually go ahead and then enable Copilot or interact then with Copilot inside of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Now I bring the Copilot pane up because if you think about it as an end user, your experience in the Microsoft stack when it comes to the Copilot first-party enablement from Microsoft is going to be through this Copilot pane. Whether or not you're in Excel, PowerPoint, Dynamics, Microsoft 365 apps, you name it, this Copilot pane should become a very familiar concept for you in the future. Now, mind you, this is Copilot, right? And there are Copilot type features that are enabled in other areas of Dynamics 365 that may not use the Copilot pane, right? So just one thing to note here is that we're going to see this evolve over time. The first level here is really getting that Copilot pane installed because during the beginning of the year, Microsoft was really focusing on the infrastructure support needed to be able to basically host large language models to be able to do a lot of the processing that we're going to be looking at really as we go through this. So let's go ahead and let me double check. Let's go ahead and flip over just really quickly here. I think Kelsey is asking for this. And so what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and show, for example, what you can do with Copilot, right? So inside of finance and operations. Now, one of them would be just informational, right? So if I, for example, come in here and then basically type in, as an example, how do I create a sales order, right? What we're going to see is that Copilot is actually allowing us basically to provide information on what we can do in terms of those particular actions. Now, mind you, depending upon how you've customized this or programmed it, these different types of prompts can be intercepted. And what I'm showing here is a way that you can actually intercept basically Copilot-based prompts by basically going through and setting up different topics as you go through that process. So in this example, I'm not asking how to create a sales order. I'm actually, in my terminology, really looking at trying to figure out how I can summarize basically a sales order. And we're going to take a look at this in just a second so you can understand some of these capabilities. But as an example, I can have different types of prompts where I can go back and forth with Copilot to basically summarize information, or I can use it, for example, to do actions for me, or I can use it, for example, as well to call other services as we go through that process. So just quickly here, if I even refresh this and I say, how do I create maybe a warehouse location as an example, we're going to see what happens here from a Copilot perspective is that it allows us to go through and basically then access information on what to do then inside of Dynamics 365 and in other applications. And it looks like we're having a little bit of a service thing. I'm going to go ahead and just refresh this so we've got the current version. And let's go to another example with this because it's not a demo until something breaks, right? So what I want to do here is I actually want to go into, for example, my customers and just show an example of a scenario that we've extended inside of Copilot to allow for some additional capability. So as an example, if I go to Frappier Farms inside of our leverage-based solution that we have, and let's say that I want to ask some questions of Copilot around this customer. An example might be I want you to summarize this customer or this grower, right, as part of this process. We can see from a Copilot perspective what's happening here is that it's able to go through and then access additional information to basically come back with what we want a summary to be that may be important for the role that we're interacting with. And this is a really big departure in terms of how we actually look at prompting and how we interact with it. More specifically, when I look at Frappier Farms here as an example that runs finance and operations, I can see, for example, the open AR balance by asking Copilot. I can see the primary address detail that's here. And what's really cool about this is that I can also see, for example, additional information around the product revenue that this customer is driving for us, along with then the product, as you can see here as well, that consists of that revenue. And all I did inside of here was basically make a Power Automate that Copilot uses to grab this data. And then I basically said to Copilot, summarize this like you were an order entry person and take the key fields you want to basically provide that summary to be able to get to this level. Now, it doesn't stop there either, right? So if I wanted to summarize the contracts for this particular grower, what I can see is that Frappier Farms has 3 open contracts, right? Of the 3, 2 of them are a contract type of cash and the other type is basis. So what's interesting about all of this is that it's taking this information, the questions that are being asked, the context of where I am, for example, inside of the record, and it's providing me then with this information. And these are, if you think about the summarization of data, you can always do this, right? As an end user, I get it. You could click on 5 different places to get that information, but you see the secret here, right? 5 different places to get that information. Instead, using Copilot for the experience, we can grab the pertinent information, bring it front and center to the user, and then even do other cool things, like create an alert for this customer when a delivery occurs against a contract, right? So we can start using these types of prompts. As you can see, an alert has been created for Frappier Farms. The alert will be triggered when the delivered quantity changes on a contract. The alert will be emailed to scottf@stoneridgesoftware.com and will also show up in the alerts of Dynamics 365, right? So just examples, right, of what we can do now with Copilot to basically then interact with these systems, create alerts, and actually do things with it. Now, this is finance and operations, right? We're not going to stop there. What about, for example, inside of Dynamics 365 sales, right? So you might have CRM, for example, and you're using some of these capabilities. Well, you can see here, I'm actually going to go ahead and just refresh this screen really quickly. And what we're going to see here is that the Copilot pane automatically pops out inside of this environment and focuses as well on the actual opportunity that we're interacting with, and even then provide some additional details of what we can do then with Copilot. So as an example here, I'm focused on a particular lead inside of inside of Dynamics 365 sales. And what I can do here, if I click on another lead as an example, is that when I click on that lead, Copilot can be configured basically to provide summary information about that particular lead or opportunity then inside of the solution. So you can see here, I clicked on that particular Heriberto Nathan that's inside of here, and we have an opportunity summary that states the estimated revenue, the grinder that's needed. It actually goes through, for example, the timeline details and the notes and the text that's inside of here to basically come up with a summarization that is then used, obviously, to basically align what you need then as an end user, right? So this summarization concept really doesn't just stop there as well, right? Meaning, for example, let's go into customer service now. So now we're flipping from Dynamics 365 sales to Dynamics 365 customer service. And for example, I may have different types of cases that I may be interacting with, right? So if I take a look at my all cases that are inside of this environment, I may then want to go, for example, to this case, and instead of hunting around as a customer service representative, I may want the system to come up with a summary then for a record that tells me all the pertinent information as to what's happened with this customer in a human readable format, but taking data from all of these different sources to basically go through and then drive that, right? So there's just a lot of great capability in that regard to be able to tackle this. Now, I know some of the people are asking in chat as well as I see this, security, right? So the thing to note is that, remember, with Copilot, we have an understanding of the user's context or the user's security profile. So if you think about it, the permissions that they have for access can be used or delegated to Copilot. So that way, Copilot, when it goes through its security, its grounding, as we call it inside of the industry, we can then restrict, for example, data that they can or cannot access by just using the native security profile and roles that you set up inside of the system. Now, there might be exceptions to that, right? Because there are scenarios where you do want, for example, Copilot to grab data that may not be related to that user's context, right? As a service principal, as we would call it back in the day. Well, we have the ability then to configure that as well, to basically state, for example, you need to go grab AR balance, but then use that in summary, but not give the end user the direct data, so to speak, to interact with it. So there's a lot of different options that we have then from a security and compliance perspective that we can use to really then address a lot of those particular scenarios. Now, this is all great, right? You've probably seen a bunch of this. We've gone through this in many different confabs where we've gone through all the great capabilities inside of Copilot. What happens if you want to do it, right? What happens if you want to extend Copilot? Or, you know what, I don't need Dynamics right now, right? I get it. Like, there's always a scenario where maybe the Power Platform would be something that you want to use, for example, to really drive then some of these different types of processes. Well, we've got you covered there as well. So just as a quick example inside of here, what we can do is we can actually go through and then set up different types of automates. And I'm going to show you just one really quickly here that I've disabled, but really shows the concept of where we can use Copilot then inside of any of our Power Automates as an example as well. So imagine this, and this is a common scenario that businesses face. You have unmonitored emails, right, or inboxes that you typically send content around regarding maybe support offerings or sales offerings. And of course, everyone always puts do not reply into it. But you know what? There's always that person like me that decides to reply to it. And you know what? Maybe I didn't know that, and as a customer, your experience that you're trying to build around your customers is really about making it easier to connect, right? Easier to move through all the spam that we have in our lives, but then to have those meaningful connections really with people as we go through our business, right? So the key thing here is that you can use Copilot to augment or add special types of capabilities to your existing platform, so that way you can basically monitor, for example, an inbox, but then have some type of an action that can occur against it. So as an example inside of this Power Automate, when a new email arrives to an inbox in this example, this could be a shared inbox if you had a shared support email as an example. But the intent here that I want to kind of show is the fact that you can take now the content that's related then to that email that came in. And in this example, if we determine as we go through this process where, for example, when we create the text using this analyze inbound emails prompt that we've created, and what's really cool about this is that these prompts, you can actually do your own custom ones that are inside of here. So in mine, what I did is I said, basically, we are a car part manufacturer, and if there is a response from a customer that states that they're interested in something related to car parts, I'd like to create an opportunity inside of Dynamics 365 Sales to then get our sales team involved and to potentially escalate that and then to process it. And so you can see here in this example, when the email comes in, take it, analyze it. If the ChatGPT based capability identifies that it is actually something that should create an order, as I say here, well, as you can see, what it does is it creates a new opportunity then, and it says car parts or service opportunity as an AI generated opportunity that now comes into Dynamics 365. So these are examples that our customers are starting to use as well, where they take, for example, information that may drive the creation of a record or a business process, for example, and they're using GPT to do that first level screening. And think about it this way. If you could spend $5 a month on monitoring an email inbox that could lead to $100,000 in sales, that probably would be a good deal, right? Now, mind you, you got to quantify it, you got to think through it, but this can help aid in that process. And what's cool about this is that you can use other areas of Power Automate to drive this as well. So just as an example, let's say you want to extend the first-party capabilities. So inside of here, as you can see, I have that alert, I've got those details that are created, and the other one was that summarized sales order that we looked at as well, right? Well, what I can do inside of Power Copilot Studio, which we're going to be talking about as well more today, is really go through and then modify, for example, the different types of topics that then drive this Copilot experience. So you as an end user can also do this, is what it really boils down to. So just as an example here, in my Copilot Studio, if I go, for example, into my topics, I've got a bunch of different topics that I've set up inside of here. And the one key topic that I want to kind of go through is the summarized sales order topic, right? And what's really cool about this is that what you can do is you can use Copilot Studio now to basically intercept different types of statements that are made then regarding, for example, a sales order in this given situation. So in this scenario, I've got a phrase that is summarize a sales order. Inside of that sales order, what I then do is I save what they did as that response and I pass it to a Power Automate flow. So what I do in that Power Automate flow, if we just quickly take a look at it, is I actually go ahead and pass basically that sales order number then into this particular flow. And if we look at the flow just really quickly in the background, what we're going to see is that it calls it, it grabs that particular sales order, and it brings that sales order back to Copilot Studio. Then what happens is I take that Copilot Studio and I actually run another Power Automate. And that Power Automate is this summarized sales order. I bet you guys, you're experts now at this. After this session, you know exactly what I'm probably doing here, right? What I'm doing is I'm passing in that sales order detail. I'm passing it as a text file, basically. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying, go ahead and take that sales order record and provide a summary with it. And so you can see here, I also added some additional context to this. So that way, when the large language model actually processes this record and it looks at it, it knows that this is a sales header record that came from Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Please keep the summary to a paragraph and focus on who sold it, what we're planning to ship, and what the transportation method will be used to deliver the order. So the additional context here is used to frame up what the actual large language model is receiving as a part of that. And finally, as you can see here, what we then do is we actually bring that message back to the end user. So what's cool about this is the fact, so if we go ahead and let's go refresh this just really quickly so we've got a fresh instance. And if I go now to our sales orders inside of the system, so we're going to go ahead and browse down and go to our all sales orders that are inside of here. What I can now do inside of here is basically we're going to pick on a sales order, right? This isn't a demo until we break something, and we've gotten close. So let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go ahead and find one that we've actually gone through and maybe invoiced and delivered. So we'll pick on, I don't know, 696. Actually, let's do Burge companies. I always like that one better. So I'm going to say this is the order I want to summarize. In this situation with this Copilot, summarize a sales order as part of it. I'm going to pass a sales order number inside of here instead of having the context come over. And what we're going to see here is that in a little bit, it's actually going to go through all those different prompts to create then that content, basically using two different Power Automates. One automate to grab the record, and then one automate to take that record and summarize it. And you can scale this, right? So if you have different areas that you want to expose this in, you can use that then to go through and drive that. So as you can see here, the sales order is the following details with the number, the order amount, the payment terms, the phone, the tax group, a paragraph of content here that says what the sales order is. It's a phone call, right? The delivery terms are FOB as well. So like I said, I didn't do anything here other than create those two Power Automates to drive that, right? And here's the cool thing about this, just longer term. You can do this anywhere. Right? So if I'm coming into here and then summarizing via a sales order as an example, and I paste that same sales order inside of here, This allows us now to use these different types of automation capabilities across many different applications. So the view of your sales orders, for example, let's say you create a custom model-driven app using the Power Platform, and you want to take then that particular app and expose Copilot capabilities by embedding then the Power Virtual Agent or Copilot Studio case capabilities. You can see here that this allows us basically then to take that content and then embed it in many different areas inside of your environment. And finally, it doesn't stop there, right? So I feel like I'm almost trying to sell, and I'm not trying to, right? But the net result here is that when we start looking at Copilot for finance, for example, an example of that might be reconciling data from, for example, my trip budget to my bank statement. Can I actually take this and actually run through a reconciliation process? And you can see by date, by category, and by budget amount are inside of here that are then compared by transaction date, category, and then amount that's inside of here for our other bank statement section, right? And when I click on next to that, what we're seeing is I've got a wonderful little reconciliation report that Copilot created that identified, for example, the type of expense, the date of that expense, and then also the difference between what was budgeted versus the actual value, and then a report summary that pops out here as well that goes through and explains a little bit of the discrepancies of data that exists inside of this particular scenario. So start thinking about these different types of concepts, right, where you can take data, multiple sets of data, send it to Copilot, for example, and have it compare it. You can send data to be summarized. You can tell Copilot to do actions. Longer term here, we're going to see even more, as you can imagine, with Copilot. That's going to really expand upon those capabilities and really drive, as you can imagine, some of those much wanted and needed automation events really inside of your environment. So I guess, Kelsey, with that, that was a lot of content to go in 30 minutes.